Hi everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on which time zones you're tuning in. Um, and Thanks for taking the time off your busy schedules and joining us in terms of our sharing session, right? So the main agenda that we're going to address today, and I'm pretty sure this is a question that has been burning on the back of quite a lot of people's heads ever since we made the $1 billion growth fund, BSC growth fund announcement, right? More details on the 100 million liquidity fund initiative, as well as how can projects actually qualify, as well as how can projects actually participate in going about and getting more liquidity from the finance sponsoring team, right? So without further ado, we have a very special guest today. We have Samsu Karim, Sami, who is BSC ecosystem coordinator, and he'll be sharing with us more details pertaining to how projects can go about participating, as well as getting a bit of the 100 million fund, right? So without further ado, welcome, Sami.
Hey, Julian. Great to be here.
Yeah. So um, I understand that you prepared a bit, a very, very special kind of information sharing as well as presentation session to share with the developer community as well as the Binance blockchain community, mostly surrounding this $100 million that we've been talking about, right? I'll just hand over the time for you, and then we can reconvene after your presentation, your sharing session for some questions and answers.
Sounds great. Yeah. Of course, a lot of the community is super interested to find out more about the details around the 1 billion growth fund that we announced last week. So at a high level, there's initially four programs that this 1 billion growth fund will be allocated towards. So half of it, or around 500 million, will be in the investments program. 300 million will be in the builder and incubation program, which is the MVP and future iterations of the MVP program. $100 million allocated towards talent development initiatives, and $100 million allocated towards the liquidity incentive program. So today we're going to be talking about more of the details around the $100 million liquidity incentive program, what it means for projects, what are the types of domains that are going to be catered for initially, and other details around it. So the incentive program is aimed at three categories initially. So there's liquidity incentives for DeFi protocols, there's liquidity incentives for gaming and NFT projects, and liquidity incentives for NFT market makers and liquidity providers and the professional trading and institutional community. There can be additional categories expanded or added later, but these are the three initial focus areas. So we'll just cover some details about each of these categories and what does it mean for the projects, and what are the ways that they can apply and how they should be thinking about it, as well as the expectations. So the initial one is the incentive program for DeFi protocol. So this is open to any DeFi protocol that's currently live on BSC. The main objective with this liquidity incentive program for the DeFi protocols is to drive sustainable liquidity and user growth. So what does that mean? So we've seen throughout the crypto ecosystem a number of chains with growing DeFi ecosystems launch large liquidity incentive programs, which are essentially just providing the protocol token, so the chain token, on DeFi protocols to increase the yield. But our program is slightly different in the sense that we are not going to be doing that directly. So the way that we want to achieve the sustainable growth, sustainable liquidity and user growth is going to be in a number of different ways. So we're also looking for the DeFi protocols in the BSC community to think about creative ideas on how this could be achieved. There's a number of interesting ideas that we've already heard from the community, and we we're looking forward to engaging with the BSC DeFi community more and helping to solidify some of these ideas and allocate some of the liquidity incentive program funding towards these. But the main point I want to emphasize here is really the way that the funding is intended to be used here is to drive sustainable liquidity and user growth, especially over a mid to long-term time horizon. In terms of how the selection and prioritization will be done is based on several factors. So it's going to be based on the current TVL for the DeFi protocols, their daily and weekly active users, the transaction volume, community size and growth, among other factors. So it's not any one of these in particular. It's really on a case-to-case basis, using a combination of them based on the type of project in order to select and prioritize the projects from the BSC DeFi community. In addition, so we also would like the projects that are applying for the incentive program, the DeFi for DeFi protocols, to also provide some planning around how they plan to grow the liquidity and drive user growth, with information about their upcoming user growth strategies and as well like details around their proposals of how they plan to use the liquidity incentive funding. So that's on the DeFi protocols. We'll definitely talk about this a little bit more and hope to hear some questions from the community and audience as well on this. The second area is around gaming and NFTs. So we've seen very large growth happening in the gaming ecosystem as well as the NFT ecosystem in BSC, and we want to continue to support that growing ecosystem in a number of ways. The incentive program here is just one of them. So the incentive program for gaming and NFTs is really aimed at subsidizing the transaction / gas fee for the projects. So we've heard a lot of feedback from the community and projects as well as users that the BSC transaction fees, if they were subsidized, could help to accelerate user growth. So this incentive program is really aimed to support that. So there's 3 tiers for the gaming and NFT projects. So the first tier, which provides a gas fee subsidy rate of 90%, is for the MVB monthly stars and MVB winners. So highly recommend and encourage all of the projects that aren't currently signed up for the MVB program. Please go and sign up and register for the MVB. Also in the tier 1 will be BSC fund portfolio projects as well as very high growth projects. So when we say very high growth, we're looking at a number of different metrics. So that's community size, unique active addresses growth, transaction volume growth. So it's generally about the traction of the projects. The second tier is for rising stars. It's projects that have a sustained high growth rate on daily active users, transaction volume growth, and other metrics over a period of time. And the gas fee subsidy rate for this tier is going to be 60%. The third tier is called the Innovation Zone, and is for new projects that are also experiencing rapid growth and initial traction based on daily active users growth, transaction volume growth, and other factors as well. So here for the third tier, the gas fee subsidy rate is 40%. So important to point out also that this is the BUIDL reward program is still running. So the BUIDL reward program, some of the community may be familiar with, provides up to 30% rebate on transaction fees through the BUIDL reward program. So this is kind of an enhancement that's leveraging the $100 million incentive program for gaming and NFTs to help accelerate further growth for gaming and NFT projects on BSC. The third category is the DeFi market makers and liquidity providers. So the DeFi ecosystem on BSC continues to grow very well, and we recognize the important role that the institutional market participants play in the healthy DeFi ecosystem on BSC. So here, the incentive program for DeFi market makers and liquidity providers is um, aimed at supporting that community. So here, there's a number of things that are going to be provided in the way of support. So funding is just one of them, but it will also include technology support, and in the funding support can include liquidity incentives as well as gas fee subsidy, as well as other coverage of other areas. So it's going to be more on a case-to-case basis. So we encourage the community of institutional market participants in the BSC DeFi ecosystem to reach out to us and or contact us through the application form, which I'll share the links to later. So the idea here is that we're going to be able to tailor programs to the specific needs of each of these selected firms. So you'll be able to get more comprehensive information about the liquidity incentive program and the three categories that I just covered, as well as more information about each three from the Binance.org blog. Here's the URL, or you can just Google Binance.org blog, and you'll be able to find the $100 million liquidity incentive program blog post. It has all of the details there. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter and check out Binance.org and follow our blog for the latest updates.
Thanks, Sammy. That has been very, very informative, and I'm pretty sure that all the DeFi projects, all the GameFi projects, you pretty much answered most of the questions that they had since we've announced this $1 billion growth fund, right? So some of the questions that we had from the community, right? One of them is in terms of what you shared so far. A lot of selection criteria and prioritization is based on several kind of metrics, right? We were talking about TVL, we were talking about daily, weekly active users, transaction volume, community size and growth, etc. Why choose that as a criteria, right? Why not just based on the novel concept of the protocol itself or the game itself, right? How did we manage to arrive at the conclusion that these are the metrics that we will be using to judge as well as prioritize whether or not a project is actually suitable for this?
That's a really great question. I think this question comes up a lot, and I'll definitely want to spend a bit of time to answer this comprehensively. So we run a number of different initiatives. So the incentive program is just one of them. We want to be able to cater to and support projects at different stages of their growth. So we have a large number of developers that are still at the kind of like ideation stage. And we do a number of initiatives there. We're running a lot of hackathons to support the developer community that are kind of with ideas and projects at that stage, as well as other initiatives. Then we have projects that are kind of in the development stage, sometimes just in like a stealth mode that we're providing typically technical support. Sometimes we're doing some advisory support around the token economics and marketing and growth strategies. So there's a number of initiatives that we're doing to cater to projects that are kind of like at that stage. And then after projects deployed, the main focus for them is really that initial traction and user growth. So there as well, we have a number of initiatives that we're doing. So they're the main ones. So for projects that are at the stage where they're either getting ready to deploy on BSC or they've already deployed on BSC and are still working on that early stage of user growth and traction, the most valuable builder program, MVB, is the program that's designed to cater for those needs. So there as well, we're able to, because due to the large number of projects on BSC today, through the MVB program, we ask projects to register their smart contracts, and then we have an initial dialogue. We start evaluating all aspects of the project. And then we start tracking their progress as well at that stage in an automated way. So it allows us to manage a much larger volume of projects there. So across all of these different support and initiative programs, we're able to cater for most programs across all of their stages. With the liquidity incentive program specifically, the liquidity incentive program is really like designed for projects that are already at early traction or beyond that. We aren't able to cater for projects before that through liquidity incentive programs because we don't. The main objective, as I mentioned earlier, but I want to reiterate, is we want to leverage that liquidity incentive funding to drive sustainable mid to long term growth. So that can only really happen with projects that already have a reasonably large sized user base and a growing user base and community. Using the liquidity incentive programs for projects at an earlier stage will not be very effective for that mid to long term growth. It typically results in very short term increase and then also a short term drop. And also, another important point to mention there is DeFi protocols that are designed well from a token economics perspective will use their own native governance tokens or other token mechanics to be able to provide the incentives to acquire users. So that's kind of like the basics that the projects themselves really need to be able to take care of. And we can support them in different ways there. It could be through advice, it could be through supporting with their BD initiatives and other types of marketing support. But the core has to be well defined and working well in order to get them through that stage of initial growth and user traction. So that's kind of the nuances around it. So just wanted to explain that, but definitely it's a very important question.
Sure. Thanks, Sammy. So from what I've understood from you, with regards to the incentive program, the liquidity incentive program per se, it seems like you mentioned, it's primarily catered to those that are already deployed on BSC and they're growing, right? Obviously we do have some developers that have been reaching out to us, some projects that have been reaching out to us, and they're in the really, really early phase of which the incentive program doesn't really cater to them, right? In your professional opinion, what's the best way then to go ahead and drive liquidity and develop that kind of liquidity if this incentive program is not something that they would be able to tap into?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I think that's more related to grow for protocols to grow within DeFi. But I think you can look at a number of good examples. There's a number of excellent success stories within the BSC DeFi ecosystem. Let's talk about PancakeSwap for one. Probably it is the largest user base among all DeFi applications today, but let's not forget they're less than 1 year old. So they did a number of things that was really contributed, and this is just my personal opinion, that contributed towards getting to them to where they are today. I mean, that team was very focused on shipping, so they were constantly shipping. They were testing new ideas all the time. Their quality of development and was also very high. They were understanding the needs and the needs of the users, testing out different ideas and then scaling those where they saw there's initial traction and product market fit. On the marketing side, and marketing and community engagement side, they were very strong. They understood the meme game very well. I'm sure a lot of their users really appreciated that and resonated very well with that as well. So there was a lot of things that they did that really contributed towards their incredible growth over the 1 year time period, and many other great examples to look at as well. In fact, too many of them to name. But yeah, I would suggest for DeFi developers and projects in the BSC ecosystem to look among the many great examples and peers in the BSC DeFi ecosystem to understand what are the things that they were really doing that contributed towards their growth and how they can replicate those same ideas for their own projects to achieve that initial traction and growth.
Sure. Thanks for the piece of advice on behalf of all of the expiring as well as growing projects on BSC. The next question I had from the community is slightly more skewed towards gaming and NFTs, right? During the presentation, you shared a bit in terms of the different tiers of how GameFi projects as well as gaming projects could actually go about and getting the kind of gas rebates or refund, right, alongside the builder program, right? However, I would think that for this incentive program is obviously not going to be a perpetual kind of program where we will refund them to the end of time, right? So per se, maybe on taking into account maybe it's only a 3 months to 6 months kind of time period, or maybe slightly longer than that. What would you say going forward if you're no longer then they'll no longer be qualified to get that gas fee bonus rebates, and considering the adoption of BSC, the rising gas fees, especially when the market's really hot. What's your best advice, or what kind of solutions do you guys have in the longer run to actually tackle the rising gas fees issues that we've been seeing, the gaming and NFT projects, the problems that they're having pertaining to gas fees?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. So it's of course, since transaction fees on BSC is denominated in BNB, it's the price for transaction fees is dynamic for that reason. So long term, we encourage and we want the gaming and NFT platforms to be self-sustaining. So their business models, token economics should all take these factors into account and be designed such that they will be able to scale without external funding support. Same thing applies for the DeFi ecosystem as well. So it's really the incentive programs here is designed to help accelerate growth, but is not should not be viewed as something that the projects will should become reliant on. Projects need to design their games and the game economies, token economies, to account for either increasing gas prices or going the other way. So the other way is not so much a problem, but games need to be able to adapt to the changing dynamics of that, and build those into their business models. This type of initiative program is aimed at driving, especially new user growth. So that's also one of the key themes of the whole fund is about bringing the next 1 billion users to crypto. And these are some of the initiatives around how we think we can help to support that is by subsidizing the gas fees, for example, for a certain period of time. So users can, it's not up for both users to get to experience different games, get to learn about different games and NFT platforms, but also for the game developers and the developer ecosystem to also be able to build systems that can help them to adapt to the transaction fees, and become over time self-sustaining. I think that's a key point that I think the developers community should consider.
Sure. Thanks for that. I think like you said, the feedback from the GameFi projects and NFT communities has been pretty overwhelming, especially since as you've mentioned, the price of the gas fees that people actually pay are in relation to the price of BNB, and that makes it really dynamic, right? Especially in a bullish market condition, that could mean paying a lot more gas fees than they were actually being subjected to. The next question we had was that how does the liquidity actually come in place when there's no actual liquidity boost on the program?
So if I understood that correctly, it's the audience member is asking that because there's going to be no liquidity boost in the sense that DeFi protocols won't be able to distribute the liquidity incentives that they receive directly to their end users, how will they be able to achieve this liquidity?
Exactly.
So it could be it could be a number of different ideas. So it could be, for example, around it could be around helping those projects um, to have both supply and demand in lending markets, for example. So I think one of the challenges you see today for the lending protocols is there's always a lot of supply, but maybe not as much borrowing happening. So it could be ways to, for example, uh, increase the attractiveness of borrowing, or even provide some type of rewards for borrowing. It could be around uh, providing certain types of incentives for new users who trade regularly or trade more, or increasing their trading activities on particular platforms. It could be around trading competitions, for example, that protocols might do. It could be around ideas around ways to leverage that liquidity to increase liquidity that's locked, or increase the depth for users to be able to trade at lower slippages. So it could be a number of different ideas there. Um, but I think the ones that we will are least likely to support is passing on these liquidity incentives directly to the end users, because that typically doesn't result in long-term growth. It usually we've seen can lead to a short-term increase in growth, but as soon as that liquidity incentive finishes, then that growth drops dramatically as well. So that kind of pattern is what we want to try and avoid here. And so we want to encourage the BSC DeFi ecosystem, the DeFi projects, to think of more creative ways that we can leverage this funding in order to drive more mid to long term liquidity and user growth.
Sure. So some of the questions that we have collected from projects, some of the questions surrounding the MVB as well as this liquidity incentive program, a lot of them actually do seem to think that recipients or monthly stars or featured kind of projects that are doing well during this season's MVB, a lot of them will be on the receiving end for the incentive liquidity incentive program. Um, could you share a bit more in terms of how does the MVB3 program actually relate towards this liquidity incentive program?
That's also a really good question. So there is a linkage here. So the MVB monthly stars, as well as the MVB winners from the previous cohorts, do get prioritized support because we have a great understanding for several reasons. We have a great understanding about their projects. They've already demonstrated their execution abilities, and they have track record in the BSC, track record of growth in the BSC ecosystem. So those projects do get priority. So so again, we'll emphasize and encourage all projects to register on the MVB, because the MVB program is a very fair way for projects to get noticed. So it's open to everyone. Everyone has an equal chance to participate there. Everyone has an equal chance to be recognized there. There is really about the team's execution capabilities, especially on both areas, on the product development as well as the user acquisition. And the teams that are doing really well there get the ability to be recognized, get a lot of support from the BSC community, the BSC team, and including from the BSC fund. So they get prioritized reviews for the incentive programs, as well as all other types of funding and other types of support programs that are being run. So definitely the MVB winners have a red carpet access to all of the incentive programs that we're rolling out. But at the same time, all the projects and all the developer community has an equal it's a very level playing field in the MVB program itself. So highly recommend and encourage all of the project teams, if they're not already, please do go and register in the MVB. For the guys that are already there, please take advantage of all of the opportunities that you have available to you within the MVB program.
Sure. So just to reiterate what you said, as well as confirm, just in case there are some groups of people who do not get it. Um, Obviously, MVB feature projects, they have the red carpet for access in terms of BSC based any of the incentive programs that we're running. They will have basically prioritization to assess those, right? But for projects that are not being featured in the MVB, even though they have registered, right? Um, would they still stand an equal chance in terms of qualifying for this incentive liquidity incentive program?
They do have. We will consider all of the. We will consider all of the projects for sure. So just to clarify here, yes, the MVP monthly stars and winners will get a priority, but all of the other MVP participants are also eligible. So we do welcome applications from all of the projects, including those that are not enrolled in the MVP. But if they are projects that are not enrolled in the MVP, please go and enroll in the MVP. But we will be looking at the applications from all of the projects. So everyone's really eligible. It's just that the MVP monthly stars and the winners have some better prioritization there. But everybody, we will review the applications and proposals of all of the projects. However, we will prioritize them based on several criteria. So based on the TVL, based on the users. So basically, we're going to prioritize the ones that have the largest user base and achieve the largest traction so far, and then work our way down from there. So encourage all of the projects to really focus on driving their and implementing, executing well their growth strategies and focusing on user acquisition. And these programs will seek to support them in parallel.
Sure. Just one last question before I let you go, Sammy. We kind of address projects that are already on BSC, projects that have are starting out, projects that have already gained some sort of traction on BSC, or really early projects that are just in its ideation phase, right? What about projects from different protocols? It could be projects that have already some sort of traction rate on maybe on Solana or Phantom, for example, and they're now looking to expand in a multi-chain being interoperable with BSC, right? Would they still also be able to qualify for this incentive program?
That's also a really good question. So I think we have moved from the multi-chain future to the multi-chain reality. I think we live now in that multi-chain reality where a lot of projects are, if they're not already multi-chain, they are. And I think for the majority of projects, they're either implementing a multi-chain strategy, have implemented a multi-chain strategy, or they're planning theirs. So definitely the program, the theme of the whole fund is not it's not exclusive to BSC. So it's a $1 billion growth fund. Yes, BSC is going to be the major focus for it, but it's really about driving new user adoption. We believe that BSC will be one of the key drivers or one of the key ecosystems and infrastructure to support that next 1 billion new users coming into crypto. But it doesn't mean to say that it's only going to be for BSC projects. So we want to speak to the best developers that are in any ecosystem. So any project teams that are working on great initiatives, that are building innovative products, that are looking at supporting this mission of driving crypto adoption, we want to speak to them. We want to support them. So we're very keen to speak to teams regardless of which ecosystem they're building in. We want to be able to support builders wherever they are.
Sure. So thanks for your time, Sammy. We might have gone a bit more than what we've expected in terms of the time. So just before I let you go, do you have any closing words, or do you have anything else you'd like to particularly highlight before we end the session?
Yeah, I think this has been great. Thanks a lot, Julian, for having me. Just to reiterate a couple of points. So for all of our followers, please follow us on our Binance Chain Twitter. as well as go to our blog. You'll get all of the latest news and announcements there, as well as in our Telegram communities. We've got a number of communities for developers specifically, as well as for the users and general public as well. Please do come, welcome you into our communities, as well as please go and follow us on Twitter.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We sincerely hope that this session has been very informative for you guys and definitely help to clarify some of the doubts that you guys might have pertaining to the $1 billion growth fund, the MVP, as well as the liquidity incentive program. Thank you. Thanks, Sammy.
Bye.
Bye.